All right, Joe, I've been waiting for this. The podcast of the big men, the trenches. Let's dive into it with our position previews, starting with the offensive line. Obviously, a position of strength last year. Illinois, one of 9 semifinalists for the Joe Moore Award. They weren't perfect the entire year, but boy, they were good. And there are a reason Chase Brown had such a successful season, why Tommy DeVito felt like he had time in the pocket most of the time. But you lose a couple of those guys in Alex Palczewski and Alex Pihlstrom. But the storyline for this group is that you got Isaiah Adams and Julian Pearl to come back, despite those guys likely would have been in NFL training camps, no doubt. Isaiah Adams would have probably been a mid-round draft pick. Julian Pearl, maybe a late flyer, maybe an undrafted free agent. But to get those guys back was such a massive win for Brett Bielema and Bart Miller, and really a sign of how much confidence those guys have that they're going to take me to yet another level that I don't have to leap now. I can make more money if I stay in college, get some NIL, really good NIL, and then go to the NFL next year and make a bigger signing bonus.
Yeah, that was a huge deal. And I think I think Barry Lunny even talked about this earlier in fall camp, if not going back to the spring. Kind of teetered a little bit over the course of the offseason where maybe Julian Pearl was leaning towards going and Isaiah Adams towards staying, and then it flipped, and ultimately it landed on both of those guys staying. And look, I know the law firm, we'll get to them later on in this podcast, Jeremy, get a lot of attention. They should. They're very, very good players. This is equally as important on the offensive side of the ball. And I think it's also important to say that Illinois saw value, obviously, in not only getting them back, which has tremendous value, but in keeping them together. That is something we talked about a lot in the offseason, especially early on and late last season, that does Isaiah Adams kick over to right tackle to replace Alex Palczewski, and you go with the bookend. I think Illinois, I don't know how deep they got in some of those exploratory ideas. They certainly explored the thought of maybe moving Julian Pearl over there, but they like what they have with those two side by side with each other on that left side. So, yeah, not only are you getting 2 guys back, you're getting the whole side of your line taken care of. And that's a big deal.
Isaiah Adams was 3rd team All Big Ten in his first season in FBS football. Like I liked him a lot as a JUCO prospect. Thought he's going to be a good solid starter his first year. He was great for most of the year. Had some issues. Like I think he wants to be more consistent with the pass blocking. Had some penalty issues. But you talk about physicality and tenacity. 120 and a half knockdowns they had him for. Doug Kramer led the team the year before and had like 89. That's ridiculous what Isaiah Adams did. And I tell you, like some people in the program, before Johnny Newton started getting this first round buzz after he came back, they think it's an actual argument about who goes first in the draft, Isaiah Adams or Johnny Newton. I think it's going to be Johnny, but that's how they feel about Isaiah Adams and how good he can be. I think because he's probably a guard prospect, he's more second day 2. But that's returning on the Illinois offensive line. That's really good. And then Julian Pearl, great length, great athleticism. For him, it's consistency, right? And he's, I mean, you look at him, Joey, compared to what he was in high school. You saw Keith Randolph tweet out a video of him, what he looked like his senior year in high school. How far these guys changed their bodies is pretty amazing. And Julian Pearl was 225 pounds, I think, when he came into Illinois, played defensive end his first year. 6 years later, it is 6 years later, I get it. But to get him back at left tackle, that's a really quality left tackle and a guy that's got a chance at the next level due to his physical traits. And obviously, they love what he brings at that position. So that is one of the best duos next to each other in the Big Ten. Like Michigan, amazing offensive line. Obviously, there's really good offensive linemen in the Big Ten. Ohio State's got a bunch of really talented guys back. But Julian Pearl and Isaiah Adams feel really good that one side of the ball you're going to be able to rely on game in and game out.
Yeah, I know the staff loves Julian Pearl's athleticism. We've talked a lot about it. It's what made him such an intriguing prospect, and what a lot of those coaches were really interested in getting him on campus. But I just don't think it can go understated the importance of having a whole side of the line taken care of. And you get an Isaiah Adams. They love him. They love his approach. They love his tenacity. We talked on our last podcast about him knocking down his coaches when Brett Bielema and Bart Miller were there during a drill. As you mentioned, the knockdowns, that did not change. And yeah, that was his first year of college football. Like he had really gone from Canada to JUCO to the Big Ten, and that you watched him. That didn't look like that looked like a path of those kids who were kind of coming up as linemen all the way and have all of the nuances of this and that down. And I remember talking to Isaiah Adams last fall, was it maybe fall camp, before he had really kind of burst onto the scene here. And he talked about just studying all of those guys. Like he spent so much time on YouTube watching this. And now you're looking at a guy who's like has his own film, Big Ten film to watch. And obviously I think there's a lot of respect for what Bart Miller does as an offensive line coach and the development there. It's just a strong left side, man. And when you're talking about incorporating new faces into this offensive line, which we'll get to, having one side taken care of two veteran guys, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, Isaiah Adams, PFF had as the third rated guard last year in the Big Ten. I mean, the Big Ten's loaded with offensive linemen, and they had him number 3 in the Big Ten. Great run blocking grade. And Pearl allowed 5 sacks last year, 10 quarterback hurries. I think both were the worst on the team, but I mean, he's obviously playing a hard position. But you wrote the story. Despite allowing 2 total sacks in the final 2 games, he allowed just 3 in the final 11 games of the season. Like that's huge improvement for Julian Pearl, who didn't have a ton of experience the year prior, right? Like, so this is a guy who's still developing, even though he's been here 6 years. It feels like he's just starting to kind of scratch the surface there. So I still think there's more upside with both those guys, that they could be all Big Ten, second, maybe even higher guys.
Well, this is also his first back-to-back year at the same position.
Right.
When he first came up, when Alex Palczewski got hurt, he played some guard, and remember he was at right tackle for a portion in 2021. Is that right? Yeah. Alex Palczewski moved into right guard. To have back-to-back years at left tackle, knowing who you are, knowing about the position, going all into that, like that's also something to be. There's something to be said about that.
Yeah. All right. Obviously, then the big question is, there's 3 players at new positions starting this year. Josh Kreutz seems to have solidified himself at center. We can get into that. Zachary Chrisler moves from right guard to tackle. And then we have the right guard competition. Let's start with Chrisler, who last year showed flashes. You'd watch this film, Joey, and there's flashes of, oh, that guy has a chance eventually to be where Pearl and Adams are going into this year. But then there was inconsistencies, as you'd expect from a guy who just went from JUCO as a true sophomore, right? You'd expect some growing pains, and he had those. He was the lowest graded offensive lineman on the Illini. Being a part of that, he was able to get all Big Ten honors, and he was a good piece. He was a solid piece, but they had to rotate him out with Jordan Slaughter last year. Doesn't sound like that's happening this year. He missed, right, the spring ball due to a shoulder injury they knew he had before he got to Illinois, got that cleaned up, and they seem to have all the confidence in the world that he can make that move from guard to tackle and do just fine.
Yeah, they knew he had guard tackle value when they recruited him out of JUCO. And I think that his approach, even though he was limited in the spring and he had that surgery, and really in the winter, you're not having a full off season. I think the way he approached it, whether that be studying, the playbook, or studying film, or finding ways to do lower body things to stay in shape, you worry. Look, it's no secret. Brett Bielema said when they got him, they need to trim him down a little bit. And you worry about a guy like that when you're physically limited in terms of what they can and can't do in the weight room and conditioning wise. And he went the opposite. He lost, the bill kind of depends on who you ask. Let's just say north of 20 pounds. I think that seems to be the general consensus. And not being able to have a full offseason, I think that told them a lot about that desire, about that hunger. Bart Miller has mentioned a new hunger that he's seen in Zach Chrisler. And like Zach Chrisler played tackle, played it in high school, played it at JUCO. He didn't play it last year. And honestly, I do wonder if he was en route to playing that last year before that late waiver for Alex Palczewski to come back came through, because I think they saw him as the right tackle last year, but now he's going to have that opportunity. We know he's big and powerful. I mean, he's a mountain over him. He's a huge individual. But he's also, he kind of pushed back. Someone asked him, do you feel like you're moving better? So no, I've always moved pretty well. He said, even when I was a big guy in high school, up to, north of 350 pounds, that I was still dunking a basketball. So he's a good athlete, and he's more nimble than he probably gets credit for
I
and
think
then he continued to slim down.
I think you and I saw it the first spring he was here. He moved and
That pole.
yeah, was that I forgot what linebacker it was. Was it
Oh,
Malachi
that pole.
Hood?
It was Malachi Hood. Welcome to college football. It's that pole. He pulled as a guard. And look, let's be honest, it felt like it was moving in slow-mo because he didn't really, I mean, that was still in the early stages of his physical redevelopment there, but goodness gracious,
But there was enough movement there that I'm like, there's athleticism there. Like and if you're losing weight, you're going to be a little bit more nimble. If you're carrying less weight, you're going to be quicker. That's just what happens. And he's got the tools, man. He's got the tools. Like Zachary Chrisler, I think, can take a massive leap. I got a breakout candidates list coming out, and it might be people might be, oh, he's all Big Ten last year. Listen, I don't know if he was an all Big Ten guy. He wasn't on my list last year, right? He showed flashes of that ability. I think he's a legit potential all Big Ten guy this year. Maybe it's honorable mention again, but I just think legitimately he can be that this year and go into next year as an NFL draft prospect, kind of like Adams and Pearl are now. So if he reaches that and can give you most of what Palczewski gave you, and I think Chrysler's probably a little bit more nimble than Palcho was after the knee surgery. Palcho is just so reliable. That's the difference there. But yeah, I think he can take a massive leap. Out of all the linemen, I think he can take the biggest leap from last year. All right, let's hit on center. I know we've mentioned it. I know we mentioned Avery Jones and every story we got about Josh Kreutz, but they tried to upgrade this position. Weren't able to get Jones here. Amari Wiggins goes to Arkansas. They end up adding Will Lease to give them some competition at center. Seems like Zach Barlev has provided the best competition there. And Jordan Slaughter repping a little bit there too. But this is Josh Kreutz's time at center, and I'm excited for him. I'm excited to see what he can do because, man, his teammates rave about his intelligence, his leadership, his tenacity, just a lot of the things you hear about Doug Kramer, overcoming the lack of physical tools or the ideal physical tools. Kreutz has got a lot of those things going for him. And obviously the Kreutz name, nobody's surprised by that, Joey.
No, and I don't think he lacks for confidence either. In fact, I know he doesn't. I know when Illinois was kind of sorting around the transfer portal, seeing who was available, who wasn't, they kept him in the loop. I mean, I don't think Josh Kreutz ever found out about anything on social media. I think they were very upfront with him about their approach in the portal. And everything I understand is his response was kind of, all right, that's fine. Bring it on. Like, not really that flustered by it. He didn't shy away from the competition in any way. And then I think that kind of paints a lot of what you hear. I know Isaiah Adams was very, very complimentary of Josh Kreutz this fall.
Which can I mention? I forgot to mention this. It was in my head. Isaiah Adams, team captain. That tells you a lot about the impact he's made in the year plus that he's been here. But continue on Kreutz.
We'll get to it, but 3 trench guys of 16 captains. Hello, Brett Bielema football program.
Hell yeah.
Oh, yeah, Werner loves it.
I'm excited.
Yeah, man. I think, and look, I think there were even times a year ago that when Alex Pihlstrom, who had that was a pretty fine year for Alex Pihlstrom. He wasn't the best center in the Big Ten, but he was a walk-on tight end like 3 years before that, and he was a vagabond offensive lineman before that, right? He played at every position. Like, that was a good year. And I think there were even times where Josh Kreutz was like, yeah, I'm good to go in there and do that. I can do that. Like, he does not lack for confidence out there. And I think that's a big thing when you're talking about a redshirt sophomore going out and getting their first chance. Look, yeah, he's undersized. Will that hurt him? I don't know. We haven't seen him play any Big Ten football to this point outside of being in the barge formation. But they believe in what they see and the way he goes about it. And I said, what do you think you showed to the coaches? There's no surprise. There's no secret. They looked around. They said, I think if you have a good day every day, nobody can say you had a bad camp. All right.
No.
Fair enough, man.
That's a good way of saying it. Doug Kramer's first year as a starter at a 65.7 PFF grade. The next year, 71.1. Kreutz is a little older than Kramer was when he became a starter. So I think those are reasonable expectations for somebody that's getting that kind of pub is intelligence. He's quick. He's quick off the snap. He should be. But yeah, it seems like they have a lot of confidence, or at least enough confidence in Josh Kreutz right now. The big question is that fifth starter spot. And boy, Jordan Slaughter's been trying to get it for 6 years now. And I think he's got a tough battle against Josh Geske, who has played tackle when Zach Chrisler's been out, whether it was the spring or this past week when Chrisler had a minor ankle injury. But assuming Chrisler's all good to go, and Bielema made it sound like he'll be good to go for the opener. We've talked about this last podcast. Seems like Geske has the higher ceiling here, and Slot, like, he seems like he's the more physical, tenacious blocker, and that's what Bart Miller usually sides with. And let's be honest, this could be a 3-year investment with Josh Geske. And last year they went with Zach Chrisler. It was kind of a similar situation, and the guy with maybe a higher ceiling that might go through some growing pains, they went with him. So it'll be interesting to see who goes. But as we talked about yesterday, I think Geske might be the favorite here, Joe.
I think so, and I've kind of been leaning that way for a little bit here.
Yeah, you've been leaning that way more than I have, yeah.
But I think his versatility also matters. I think the ability to kick him out, to tackle helps him. And, they want to get some of those game reps, I think. But he's powerful. He's a big, strong, powerful guy who probably moves a little bit better than you would think, just given how strong he is. We'll see. I do wonder if even if he wins it, which I think he will there be a rotation like there was last year? How much of that rotation was, one, to manage Chrisler's continued physical development, and I do wonder if it was part of to manage his injury that they knew was there and they knew was ultimately going to need to be treated, or how much was it just trying to get Jordan Slaughter out there? So I think this will tell us a lot if they rotate Slaughter in this year. And
it's a credit to Slaughter that if that's your sixth guy, that's a pretty good place to be comparatively to where Illinois has been before. Because Jordan Slaughter, I don't know if he's going to be an all Big Ten guy, right? Like if he was, I think he would have won this job easily. But he's a serviceable guy in your rotation, and they're working him in at center. I don't know if he's going to be able to play that, but the fact that you got an experienced guy, had 60-something PFF grade last year. And when I watched him, he just held his own. I think the fact that you have that guy, an experienced guy, and it sounds like, Bart Miller raved about his maturity and handling everything that he's gone through the last couple of years with injuries, not winning the job. You have a guy that's got Big Ten experience and solid Big Ten experience at that. So the fact that he's still, like, if he's your sixth guy, I think that's a positive sign for Illinois.
Yeah, let's be honest. There were drives that he came in relief of Slaughter that kind of gave the offense some juice. I thought there were drives that really looked like they picked up when he came in at right guard. Maybe it's just a natural flow of the game, but he certainly had moments last year that you thought, okay, this is the guy who's been battling for a job for a couple of years before that injury.
I thought he was more reliable than Chrisler, but Chrisler just had moments that I just don't think Slaughter can replicate physically on the field. So I think that's a positive sign for Illinois. Let's get into the depth chart. Who else could play? Brett Bielema mentioned 7 to 8 guys, Joey. I'll let you lead off here.
It's Brandon Henderson. It's Brandon Henderson season. I hate to I think he's in that top 7 and top 8 for sure, because I think he can play a lot of positions. You would say him, say Zach Barliv, Jordan Slaughter, and then I wonder who the 8th is. If there's an 8th, Hunter Whiteneck probably.
We've got 8. So, you mentioned 3 off the bench there with Slaughter if he's not.
I can't do math. Oh, no.
Brandon Henderson can play guard or tackle. I think they're grooming him to be the left tackle of next year. But I think Hunter Whiteneck, if he's your 9th guy, because he played last year. He played 7 games, or he played all the games, right? I think for the most part. Special teams. And I think that was getting him ready to play this year in case he needed to. And I think they'd be comfortable if they have to put him in for a series or so. So the fact that he's your 9th guy, I don't know if he's fully ready. Hunter Whiteneck's not the most nimble guy, but boy, he's a van. Is that Brett Bielema or Bart Miller said that?
Brett Bielema. I still wish that NIL opportunity would come through for a 1996 Astro van.
Or just a light van. He's huge. He looks like a Wisconsin offensive lineman. So, yeah, the depth, I think you're starting to feel better about. Listen, I don't know what Brandon Henderson is this year. Zachary Barliv, I haven't seen at center, but it looks better. Like, even talking with a scout, he said up front, their depth, especially, he used to mention the offensive line too. Like, they got a couple more dudes coming up that should be pretty good. And I think Brandon Henderson's a big part of that. He's an impressive looking guy, and I think he's got so much more to go physically with Tank Wright. But they have way more confidence in a true freshman to potentially play than I thought they would have at this point, even though I liked him as a prospect.
Yeah, I kind of thought with this staff, given what they want on the offensive line, that the thought of a true freshman coming in and potentially playing right away. We should say, like, I just don't think we'll see him. I think we'll see him in 4 games if they can swing it, but I don't think it's going to be, barring an injury, one of those things where you see him rotate in.
Barring injury or underperformance, right? Or just he takes a huge leap during the season.
Yeah, so I don't want to set the expectation to, hey, wait, you'll see this guy at some point a lot. I don't know that that's it, but the fact that it's a real possibility, like it is something that it appears they feel comfortable in some degree with as a true freshman, probably tells you a lot more about Brandon Henderson than the depth on the offensive line. Because they would conceivably have guys who could go in there and spell, for an injury, whether that's a quarter or a game or a couple games, and he's in that mix. And this is a position they've recruited well. Like they have other options there. So that tells me a lot about him.
Yeah, and the fact that his emergence is big because Desmond Schuster was kind of supposed to play that role, right? And with his unknown, he's still got to be cleared. Sounds like something personal with him. I don't want to dive into that, but his availability is in question. So Desmond Schuster, a year older than Brandon Henderson, kind of similarly built. I thought Desmond Schuster was kind of going to be your top guard potentially in the 2 deep. So the fact that Brandon Henderson potentially play that role, I think is really important. Any other guys? I mean, we mentioned Whitenack's probably in the 2 deep. Moeller probably technically, Magnus Moeller's probably in the 2 deep if you just went left tackle, but I don't think he'd be the next left tackle up. I think they'd move things around, whether it's Isaiah Adams or Brandon Henderson playing there. Clayton Leonard got scout team last year. I don't think he's ready for quite an impact. Joey Okla has kind of moved between guard and center. I'm really high on TJ McMillan's future, but
I don't think you're alone on that.
Yeah, they don't quite need him at center yet with Josh Kreutz, but my guy after Josh Kreutz would probably be TJ McMillan.
Yeah, a guy could be a multi-year starter for Illinois. I think they're high on him. He didn't come in. He came in at the same time as Brandon Henderson, and all the attention's justifiably gone to Brandon Henderson because he's, by all accounts, had a good spring and summer and fall. But they still really, really like where TJ McMillan is and what he can be for them long term.
Yeah, and Zach Amlin got eyes on him for the first time this fall in training camp. I think he's got a long way to go, just technically and all that, but he looks the part. I mean, you look at him, Whitenack, Moeller, those guys certainly look the part of Big Ten tackle.
And they've got more guys looking the part coming in the class of 2024.
Yeah, Brandon Henderson, Zafir Stewart, Caleb Pyfrom, all legit Big Ten guys. All right, Joey, let's wrap this up on the offensive line with expectations. How good can this group be?
I don't know that they're going to have 5 all Big Ten offensive linemen again. I think 3 feels right, the big 3. Julian Pearl, Isaiah Adams, Zachary Chrisler. I think you could have guys higher up than they were a year ago on those all Big Ten lists. Will they be a Joe Moore semifinalist? Probably, because it's Brett Bielema and Bart Miller's offensive line. And I think there's a reputation. I think they're going to play well for large stretches.
You mean Illinois gets a positive reputation and they get the benefit of the doubt with some of these things? That's a step in the right direction there, Joey.
Don't say that too loud, or someone might disagree. I don't know. I think it can. It's a good question. I don't want to say I think it could be what it was a year ago because the 2 guys who are gone are sitting in NFL camps right now as we get closer to September and cut day.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a pretty big thing. But I think this staff has earned the benefit of the doubt. This is going to be an upper half of the Big Ten offensive line. They're going to be physical as heck.
Yeah, I bent down there to get Phil Steele's book. They have Illinois' offensive line ranked 5th in the Big Ten behind Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and Wisconsin, and tied with Iowa. And I know Wisconsin brings some guys back, but Illinois' offensive line was so much better than them last year. Like so much better. I know Wisconsin's is young, but Illinois gets some young guys like Zach Chrisler and Josh Kreutz are young. I think Isaiah Adams and Julian Pearl, going back to the main storyline, that floor is so high for this group. The fact that they are back. And you mentioned it. It's a Brett Bielema, Bart Miller operation. Bart Miller's a really good offensive line coach. Really good. And this is where they have changed the program a lot, is in the trenches. And they are good in the trenches. They got 2 really good position coaches on the offensive line and defensive line in the trenches, and they get the most out of their guys. Alex Pilstrom was an all Big Ten center last year. That's insane. Like, it's kind of insane. Like, all 5 guys got all Big Ten honors last year. It's pretty crazy. But Isaiah Adams' development was ridiculous last year. And the fact that, Palcho bounced back like he did from that really serious of a surgery is pretty great. So I think Chrisler takes a big step forward. I think Kreutz at least is serviceable, and I think they'll get a serviceable right guard. And then 3 all Big Ten guys at left tackle, right tackle, and left guard. I think it's going to be a really good group, and I think Illinois is going to have a ton of rushing success. And I think Luke Altmaier should be protected pretty well, but I expect some inconsistencies. I don't know if they'll be as good or better than last year, but I think they'll be pretty dang close, and I think they'll be a huge strength of the team.
Yeah, I could see a similar timeline. Remember last year, it's not like they came out of the gates on fire as an offensive line. There were growing pains. Alex Pihlstrom in particular had growing pains.
Indiana goal line. Go back to that film. Yeah.
Zachary Chrisler had growing pains last year. I think you could see a similar, where Josh Kreutz is going to have some growing pains. If it's Josh Geske, he's going to have some growing pains. Maybe Zachary Chrisler has those early on at right tackle. But I think I feel weird because I say this. I feel like at almost every position group that by the middle of August or October, I think with Bart Miller as the coach and more game reps, Josh Kreutz doesn't have any game reps at center. Josh Geske doesn't have game reps at right guard.
You know what I have little question about with these guys? I mean, we got to see Geske and Kreutz. They're all the coaches, players talk about their physicality and tenacity. That's what they want. Like they're going to have some growing pains with the technique, and maybe they get beat on a move because their technique was off. But this is going to be a physical tone-setting group that I think is going to help Illinois later on in games wear an opponent down. And that's what Brett Bielema is really known for, right? So I think they will continue that tradition.
I have not a lot of concern about the Illinois offensive line. I think that's the best way I can put it. Will it be perfect for 13 potentially games? Probably not.
Right.
But I think it is by the end of the season, it's going to be in an upper half of the Big Ten offensive line, which is something I think should be the standard in this Brett Bielema and Bart Miller operation.